In this video, I am going to explain the use of factory constructor in Dart programming language. Use a factory constructor in situations where you don't necessarily want to return a new instance of the class itself. So you would want to use factory constructor in situations when you only want to create one instance of the class itself and follow the singleton pattern. You can also use a factory constructor to return a subclass instance instead of the class itself. Calling the default constructor is expensive, so you would want to return an existing instance of the class instead of creating a new instance. A Dart class may have two different types of constructors: generative constructors or factory constructors. A generative constructor is a constructor that always returns a new instance of the class. A generative constructor does not make use of the return statement. A factory constructor has a looser constraints than a generative constructor. A generative constructor always has to return a new instance of the class, whereas a factory constructor may or may not return a new instance of the class. A factory constructor can return an existing instance of the class. A factory constructor can also return an instance of the subclass. If a factory constructor has to return a new instance of the class, then it has to call a generative constructor. Factory constructors and generative constructors can both be named or unnamed. Take a look at the example given on our screen to understand the use of factory constructors. The program given on our screen makes use of both generative constructor and factory constructor. So on line 18 we have a generative constructor named logger._internal. Now this is a private constructor and cannot be accessed outside the library itself. So on line 8 we have a default constructor which is a factory constructor. So the default factory constructor accepts an argument name which is a string. So this program has various instance properties. The first instance property is a string name. The second instance property is a boolean mute which specifies whether this logger is enabled or not. The third instance property is the property named _cache. The cache property is a map of string and logger type. The default factory constructor accepts an argument name which is a string, and inside this factory constructor is a return statement. Now this return statement works on the cache map. So the putifAbsent method checks if the string name is present inside the cache map, and if it is present, then returns the value of the cache map. If it is absent, then it creates a new instance of the class itself by calling logger.internal and then passing in the name string. And this new instance is then saved in the cache map. So by calling the putifAbsent method, we are making sure that we are only creating one instance of the class itself, and if this instance is already present for the name string, then that is the instance that is returned by this factory constructor. So above example helps us to understand the singleton pattern, where only one instance of the class is created for a specific data type. So on line 14 we have another factory constructor, and this is a named factory constructor. It is called logger.log2. So what this constructor does is that it calls the default factory constructor by passing in the string 2 as the name. So on line 19 we have the log method which is void log. It accepts a string as a message. Inside the log method we have a print statement that prints the message and the name of the logger. Now this print statement is only called if value of the mute variable is false. Inside our main function we are creating two different variables, log1 and log2. Both log1 and log2 are new instances of the class. The log1 makes use of the string 1 as the name of the logger. The log2 makes use of the string 2 as the name of the logger. On line 25 and 27, we are calling log1.log and log2.log to print the message hello world on our screen. So from the output on the right side of our screen, it is clear that both log1 and log2 work as intended. So we hope that this video was useful for understanding factory constructors in Dart programming language.